Excellent. Thank you so much, Tara. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. I've been really looking forward to our time together. And I was telling Tara right before we started the call that I have been hearing from some of you. Some folks have already jumped in my inbox and have said hello, and it's been like such a warm group and a welcoming group. So this has been super cool. So like Tara mentioned, I'm here with you for the next hour or so. Hopefully we will have a little bit of time at the end here to get into maybe some discussion, maybe some Q&A. But in the meantime, I am super pleased to be able to share with you a bit about some of the MIT AgeLab, what it is, what our thinking and approach to longevity sort of is, and also kind of what is going on in our research these days. So keeping that in mind, let me go ahead and share my screen and we can get started. So I do just want to thank Tara and Ryan. I'm not sure if he's on right now, but for inviting me and for having me come in today. I love getting to do things like this. I love getting to talk with folks like yourself who are, essentially I kind of see you all as having the boots on the ground, right? Of knowing really what is going on in aging services these days and sort of really being on the pulse of that work through the work that you do. So this is always a real treat for us. Before we really get into our research, I always like to kind of level set the thinking here about what it means when I talk about population aging or longevity. So we know from years and years of data at this point that there are major sociological and demographic shifts occurring. You all know this, I would presume, as fabulous members of the council and as business owners and leaders and the like. But just so we're all on the same page here, we've seen massive increases in life expectancy over the past 100 years or so because of advances in medicine and public health and technology. So our lab is very interested in what we can do to better our understanding of what it takes to live longer, better. So we believe the idea of aging or old age is really one that we've largely made up as a society, frankly. And I think this really translates into all of the research that we do. So we consider, indicator like life expectancy as displayed here as a really important sort of data point, if you will, around understanding, what is going on with population aging, what is going on with longevity and the like. My folks that are interested in the details will know that an indicator like life expectancy is certainly a fickle one. We've seen actually drops in recent years due to the COVID-19 pandemic, due to issues around drug use and sort of the opioid epidemic, lifestyle diseases, suicide, things like this. So in case you're curious about kind of the weeds there on that, we can also leverage other kinds of indicators, such as overall population size, right? We're seeing declines in population sizes in the US and in certain countries around the globe. We've also seen birth and fertility rates declining, which generally indicates smaller family sizes, right? Which suggests that we might have more older folks kind of concentrated at the top of that age population pyramid. So all of this is to say that we have lots of different data and indicators to know that we're not really having a theoretical discussion anymore about population aging and the idea that we are indeed living longer. So in addition to this, we can also look at data around race and ethnicity or sex and gender to, again, better understand essentially what's going on with people, right? And in the US context, let's say, what does the US look like? Because we also believe that demographic trends such as these have really important implications for how people think and how they act and how they make decisions. So if we think back to our life expectancy chart we looked at earlier, we know that a baby girl born today is expected to live well into her 80s, and the odds are that she is going to age better and live longer than many men that she'll know throughout her life. So again, we think that this has really big implications, right, for how people are thinking about or how they need to be thinking about, frankly, aging and what that means for them. So should the gap between the sexes close, the gap in life expectancy, for example, it's certainly possible that couples could expect to live longer together, right, which could influence decisions that people make. We know currently that women in the US alone decide where trillions of dollars go every year in spending in general. We know that we say that middle-aged firstborn daughter in particular is controlling more than 85% of consumer purchases and making nearly 90% of all health purchase decisions. That sort of oldest adult daughter doing most likely a lot of the care coordination in the family, things like that. So through our research at the lab and our work, we've learned that women's notions of what old age is are very different from men's. And so traditional products that may be aimed at older adults, for example, might be an example of a class of products that tend to serve female consumers particularly poorly. So when we think about that baby girl who might be born today, we know that she will actually be the chief consumer officer, we say, of her household and make purchase decisions and control a large amount of the family's dollars for a very long time. And it's far more savvy than we give her credit for. So related to this idea of kind of what I'm trying to imply here in using different kinds of sociological indicators, we can understand that these disruptive demographics really do matter because it means that consumers are going to be coming to the table with very different and diverse needs, wants, and expectations from their technology, their healthcare, their services, their products, etc. So last indicator here, the US is expected to be minority white by about 2045. The population of aging white Americans across all ages in particular is expected to increase modestly through about 2024 and then decline through 2060. And some of the largest growths that we anticipate seeing among the 65 plus demographic include those who identify as Hispanic or Latino, as well as those who identify as Black or African American. So that's cool. Okay, Taylor, you just kind of told me like things I already know that are happening. Totally. This is very much, however, the basis of where the MIT AgeLab sort of comes from and sort of where we live. The innovation of science and technology of medicine that have enabled us to live longer is great, right? It means we are just beginning to encounter kind of an endless frontier in living longer. But now we have an opportunity where we are right now in time and in history to be doing work that doesn't only contribute to living longer, but instead contributes to a new frontier of us living well for longer. So we are not a biological research lab. We don't do anything with your tissue or your cells to help enable us to live physically longer. Instead, I like to say we are a social science lab, a sort of multidisciplinary lab that's really interested in rethinking and examining the infrastructure of our world that contributes to age readiness. So what does this mean? Again, we are interested in lots of different kinds of research questions on any given day. Fundamentally, though, a lot of our research is driven by a need to understand how people seek information, how they navigate complexity in their lives, how they make decisions as they age, and especially all of those three prongs in regards to topics like technology use or technology adoption and automation and sort of the nexus or intersection there with technology. So I like to show this graph. This is some content from our lab director, Dr. Joseph F. Coughlin's book, The Longevity Economy. This was written in 2017 or so. Highly recommend if you are at all interested in this topic or in learning more about anything that we talk about today. But in Joe's book, he sort of posits that current and sort of future generations of older adults have very different expectations for how they wish to age relative to the older adults of 100 years ago or of previous generations, of even my grandparents compared to myself and how I expect to age. And so this is a really important thing because it influences essentially, again, how people think and how they spend their time and how they spend their money. So we sort of believe that this idea of the longevity economy is one that our institutions and our society is really not targeting, innovating around, or even really preparing for when we think about longevity and population aging. So when I talked with Tara to get set up for this talk today, we talked about a lot of things, and something that really struck me in our preparation for this afternoon was thinking a little bit about what aging in place means, and in the very kind of broad definition and the various definitions that people take to this. And so for me, in thinking a little bit about how I was going to sort of best represent the lab and talk about some of the research we're doing and how it relates to some of the very issues I would imagine that most of you all are encountering in your work as well, I decided to take this kind of key issues lens here. So I sort of think that thinking about enabling people to age in place in their communities, whatever that means for them, for a better life tomorrow, for more older adults, really requires understanding that there are some key issues we see time and time again in our work at the lab as well. So I think this means we certainly must recognize that our society has really positioned aging, right, as a problem to be solved rather than an opportunity to be realized here. The pandemic, right, is an example of this that most recently reinforced this very clearly. But additionally, that again, there's been this sort of failure to innovate for older consumers, or at best, we've been reactionary or rushed in our innovating to fulfill a stereotypical need or idea of older age. So we're going to kind of talk about each of these bullet points here. Let me get into the first one here. So we know that the vast majority of older adults desire to age in place, right? To sort of remain in their current dwelling indefinitely. And given that 60% of adults ages 80 and older have lived in the same home for more than 20 years, it's safe to say that a lot of people have strong attachments to their neighborhoods, their homes, and their communities. So we also know that the idea of aging in place, right, is one that offers a lot of economic and financial benefits, as well as health benefits potentially too. But there are frictions, right? There are functional losses that can come with aging that can threaten one's ability to remain in the home. And so I'm presenting to you here a paper from a research study we did a couple of years ago to answer this question of if new technologies and services, including, and I would say especially so, in the sharing economy, can they help us age in place and actually save us money in the long term? So the sharing economy, you'll see again, lots of different definitions for this as well, but our definition here was defining the sharing economy as the peer-to-peer based activity of obtaining, giving, or sharing access to goods and services coordinated through community-based online services. So prominent examples you've probably heard of, right? Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, TaskRabbit, things like this. A lot of sharing economy businesses reflect actually traditional services that might be offered through existing organizations. But for older adults who maybe don't qualify for certain kinds of federal or state services, or maybe those who desire more flexibility or diversity in kind of offerings, we think that sharing economy services could enable them and really caregivers too, to be able to manage or handle certain kinds of tasks, especially those more complex tasks like grocery shopping, laundry, housekeeping, and the like. So we did a thought experiment where we essentially estimated the cost of utilizing a whole bunch of sharing economy services to approximate the level of instrumental support that we might expect to be provided by an assisted living facility. I should say, tell me in the chat what you think the result of this is going to be, right? We approximated the cost for about an 85-year-old to age in place using various sharing economy services compared again with the cost of living in an independent or assisted living facility in the Metro Boston area, which is certainly not representative of the larger US for sure. But we found that for that 85-year-old homeowner living without significant physical or financial distress and without a mortgage, the total cost of living at home using sharing economy services for 1 year was about $3,000. This was compared with a total monthly cost of about $6,000 for an assisted living model in the Boston Metro. So the idea here, right, that the sharing economy model would cost less than half the amount. This study also was done in 2016, which I think if we were to try to repeat it with the same parameters today, that might be even I would presume both would increase substantially, but I think the gap could possibly be even wider. And so, again, the sort of idea here is to demonstrate that we are certainly thinking about what some of the opportunities and costs are, that tension between helping folks age in the place that's right for them with the incorporation of various technologies and services. So very much related, I wanted to kind of highlight the work that's going on in our Connected Home Logistics Consortium as well. How we live at home these days is really in a very profound state of flux. COVID and the pandemic has really pushed forward the role of technology in our lives in general, but certainly in our homes. And so home is now everything, right? Home can be therapist's office, home can be doctor's office, home can be movie theater and the like. And technology is really enabling us to do that and to do new and different kinds of tasks as well. So we also know that the pandemic accelerated awareness and adoption of technology by older adults and family caregivers in a major way and in a much more rapid pace of adoption than I think previously than we've really ever seen before. So this is sort of the area where this consortium lives. We are interested in working with our C3 consortium members to study emerging tech ecosystems and to really re-envision how the home is going to transform as sort of this platform capable of improving life for everyone across generations, right? But we also know that folks who are desiring to age in place could stand to benefit in particular from sort of the integration of all these different kinds of systems and technology in the home. So this idea is also very closely related to virtual assisted living, if you've ever heard of that term. But we see this as more than just a home technology services concept and more about this sort of class of assets that goes just beyond brick and mortar to really encompass brands, to encompass partnerships and organizations as well as technology, of course. So this consortium is doing lots of really interesting work. Again, if home is really going to be the right place for some of us to age in place, it's inevitable that technology is going to help us do this now and definitely in the future, right? So the consortium's work, and I should have mentioned, our 3 C's stand for connectivity, care, and convenience. Our consortium's work is really focused with at least initially here, trying to understand consumers' needs, since changes in how we use technology and our attitudes about technology are very tightly connected to our lifestyles and changes in our lifestyles. So we are concerned with a couple of different pieces here that you see displayed. This is some of the work that they are doing right now. Let's see, I think I have some, oh, maybe not. There we go. I was like, I have some red highlights somewhere. The home kit is sort of a concept. We're kind of engaging in an iterative process of creating essentially a piece of technology that we can use to actually kind of convene all the different devices and brands that we have in our home, right? We have all these different things, but none of the devices are actually speaking to each other. So what does it mean to have a centralized, another piece of technology, right? And a centralized thing in the home in order to help us be a little more integrated and a little more connected to all of our home devices so that they can be speaking to each other. So the HomeKit process has been fairly iterative. I think they're on their third version of it right now, and starting to really move into putting the kit out into people's homes. This is sort of the piece you see on the right side here with the little plastic around it on the wood. This is an older picture of what it looks like. It looks a little more high tech now, but we are, again, fielding use of this piece of technology with diverse groups of people to really understand, again, how do we even use this thing, right? How do people use it? It's easy to set up. What is going on there? But then how does this actually interact with people's likelihood of considering to use other kinds of smart home systems or influence their attitudes about adopting other kinds of in-home technology in general? Could we actually nudge people into adopting technology for the home to help enable them to age in place at home for longer, just by exposing them to something like this, to participating in a study like ours? So this is one piece that this consortium is working on. I click too many times and you'll see our kind of home technology concept survey as our second red highlight on here. This is a study we're doing examining people's opinions about scenarios regarding in-home technologies that really don't currently exist, right? So how likely would you be to adopt this concept? What would you use it for? Our goal with this is to really look at these data in relation to existing technology adoption data, but also to inform industry on what people want and need to focus. This will help them to focus on certain kinds of users and things like this. So again, just thinking a little bit about the importance here of really how people are using technology and what they're using it for. And then the other piece of this work I really just wanted to highlight, because I think it's super cool, is this home automation taxonomy development piece. So we are currently trying to define current and future smart homes, right? So we actually have a really good understanding from the literature and from previous research on autonomous vehicle automation and essentially what the levels of automation are, what they look like, what they mean. But there really isn't a framework for smart homes and for homes that are increasingly getting smarter. So there are different kinds of ideas, but they really vary based on the kinds of technology or sort of nature of the smart home. And so we are sort of working on developing a taxonomy that explains different kinds of homes based on their smartness, very official term from MIT, right? Their automation capabilities and sort of decision-making tools available for the residents to use in them to support their lifestyles. So this is just a little smattering of some of the work that's happening around home and how we are thinking about aging at home these days. A second key question for me and thinking a little bit about this intersection of kind of aging in the right place for somebody and in our research is certainly our work on transportation as well, right? So, we have to be able to, we will often in our work with financial planners and advisors offer this question, this set of questions for advisors to sort of offer their clients, which is, how will you get an ice cream cone? We have some other questions as well, right? But how will you get an ice cream cone when you are older? So this involves transportation. How will you physically get out of your home into some sort of receptacle that can then transport you to the ice cream? You get your ice cream and then you actually come home. Oh, I think that somebody is coloring on my slides. This is fun. Let me see if we can clear that. There we go. Okay. Also, you're welcome to color on the slide. It's a big white slide, so it may be that we need a little more color, in which case, please. The idea here around aging in the right place should also mean being able to get outside of your home, right? So we see transportation as a really key element to thinking about aging in general, because it enables us to do what we want to do, go where we want to go, and see who we want to see. And we know that older adults today are driving more relative to previous generations of older adults. About 60% of those aged 85 and older are current drivers. And in the US, more broadly, we actually see other trends around licensure pickups and things like this, people getting their license, right? People are actually transitioning away from driving as a primary mode of transportation, and people are waiting longer to get their license in the first place. So this, again, has really big impacts about how people are getting around their communities, how they're thinking about how they will get around in the future as well. So we have a consortium of work as well happening around driving and around transportation. It's supported by a whole bunch of car companies, equipment manufacturers, and some tech companies as well. And the key objective of this work is to do research to really understand the behavioral and safety impacts, in particular of advanced driver assistance systems, as well as things like, higher levels of automation and other in-vehicle technologies that we have available to us now in real world driving, right? Because theoretically, these are the technology that could help keep us on the road for longer. So we have a couple different tools we use to do this. We have an on-road fleet of vehicles that can help us to understand human vehicle or sort of human technology interaction in the vehicle environment. So we can actually put people out on the road and we can take data based on their physiology. So maybe your sweat conductance, we can track your eyeballs to see how you are reacting to different kinds of stressors on the road. We can really try to understand in a very naturalistic environment how people interact with these kinds of technology on the road. We also have this in-lab simulator, which you see here on the right side. This is a simulation environment, a simulation driving environment when on-road driving isn't necessarily appropriate, right? So most recently, we did a study examining the impact of an anti-anxiety medication on folks with autism spectrum disorder. And that was very much the case where we wouldn't want to put people in cars on the actual road, but we can put them in the laboratory environment. So I love talking about this work as well because we got our lab was started with a US DOT grant and some insurance companies thinking about older drivers and the impact of kind of driving for longer. And that's also why our lab is sort of classified under MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics these days. So we have learned certainly some really important implications and insights from this work, right? Age is actually a really bad predictor of whether someone needs to transition away from the keys, right? And it's also not necessarily what this research is designed to uncover. Health is a much better predictor of people's continued safer driving. We can also help us or use this work to help us to understand the importance of driver attention during a task like driving, and what helps keep drivers in this sort of just right state with technology. So those are some of the main kind of key insights or sort of key purposes, if you will, of this work. And I feel like I can't really mention this research without also talking about autonomous vehicles, right? So we've done tons of surveying of the generations over time around their perceptions and thoughts about autonomous vehicle use. So some really important bullets here, right? Autonomous vehicles don't really solve this sort of last 100 feet problem. We sort of say it's the journey from actually getting out of your house into the car and getting, into the car to the place that you're going to, right? An autonomous vehicle doesn't help us solve that mobility challenge. Additionally, consumers tend to not know what they don't know about autonomous vehicles, right? So we've done some studies where we've asked people to select essentially different kinds of definitions of autonomous vehicle, or I should say a vehicle automation, essentially. And generally people don't correctly guess like that these pieces actually are what they think they are with regard to an autonomous vehicle. In fact, most people select descriptions that conform to driving assist technology that's already on the market, right? Not even a level of automation that technologists are kind of currently working on that we don't even have a mental model for yet. So I would say in addition to this last point here around risk, right, makes a ton of sense and is also really important. So how much risk are people really willing to accept with regard to using autonomous vehicles? And so people are certainly more tolerant of that risk for transporting not people, right? And transporting actually maybe people depending on age, right? That people are less willing to let younger children ride in those vehicles by themselves versus being accompanied by adults or another scenario there. So certainly in the near future, these kinds of vehicles are not going to solve all of our mobility challenges. There are limits to this tech, and there are limits to people's current understanding of what these existing technologies even do, as well as their willingness to accept risks in general. So we have a lot of work to do here still around examining people's driving behaviors in the real world, supporting older drivers and making safe decisions about when and where to drive, and continuing to develop our understanding and exploration of alternative mobility options for people. I believe one of our next kind of pieces here or key issue is around this idea of thinking about design in particular. Designing products and spaces that improve our well-being, and our ability to age in place, but that aren't also stigmatizing, right? So people are really aging into environments that are not designed to accommodate large populations of older adults, and many designers of products and technologies and services, right, are younger people who have not necessarily experienced the world from an older adult's perspective. So AGNES is one of our research tools. The acronym stands for Age, Gain, Now Empathy System. It's a research tool that we've designed to mimic some of the more common anatomical or chronic kind of changes that may occur as we age. So wearing this suit gives folks the opportunity to really experience the physical and social world in the shoes of a version of their future selves. So the idea for the suit draws on experiential learning theory, the idea that knowledge is created through the transformation of experience, but the suit is also an exercise in developing empathy, right? So it's certainly one thing to gain a lot of insight from talking to people directly about what they want and need, but it is a different experience altogether when you're having it yourself. So AGNES is one of the more popular faces of the AgeLab. I will make sure that I have an opportunity to give you some links in the chat before we finish our time together. But I think most recently she was in a PBS documentary called Fast Forward. AGNES is actually not as high tech as people tend to think. She is really comprised of a series of low-cost exercise equipment, again, to simulate some of these more chronic conditions. So we don't really prescribe an age to her at all. You can see this very attractive photo of me doing things in a park in AGNES. We will put a series of weights around the joints to simulate muscle loss. We'll do braces to simulate more stiffness and sort of restrict mobility. We have goggles that simulate different kinds of eye conditions, pieces such as these. AGNES was really created in response to actually getting multidisciplinary teams to play well together. We were doing some work with Daimler, I think now Mercedes back in the day, around building car interior parts. And we came up with this tool because it was a good way to remind these, brilliant engineers and marketers and technologists that actually it's important to focus on what you have in common in order to actually get to the end result here. And what they have in common is actually not the product. It wasn't actually the car parts or the car interior. It was the person riding the car. So one of the more popular studies with AGNES that I like to talk about is a study we did on retail and in partnership with CVS. So we had CVS executives and AgeLab researchers navigate their stores. We had them go to the Minute Clinic, the pharmacy, try to really understand the whole customer journey across a bunch of different tasks. And right away, right, there's kind of immediately you slip into AGNES, and there's kind of this increased cognitive load that really just starts to accumulate the longer you're in the suit. And so we sort of say there were these 3 Fs. AGNES really reveals to you kind of the friction, the frustration, and the fatigue of kind of the experience of navigating through whatever the journey is. And through that, we can actually see how people sort of hack their environment, right? How do they overcome the little challenges that they're encountering every time they encounter that friction or frustration or fatigue? And then also, in addition to the sort of natural hacks that people are doing and may not even realize that they're doing to make things easier, what are the aha moments, the sort of big light bulbs that are also going off for people? Right? Because that sort of brilliant technologist or engineer has the ability to know that this doesn't have to be this way, right? We don't have to accept the design of something just for what it is. We can actually change it and make it different. So AGNES is, again, I mentioned one of the more popular tools of the lab. We use her in a lot of our design work, and again, to help people have a different kind of experience around thinking about really what is technologically possible with the design of whatever they're doing. I also just want to mention, I'm realizing I've packed like way too much into this PowerPoint for an hour. So that's good news for me, but less exciting for you, because it means I might have to skip around here. I want to just recognize some of our other work we have going on around caregiving and around some of our research panels in general. So Aging in the Right Place certainly really recognizes caregiving as a new normal for everyone in the 21st century. We know that over 20% of adults in the US are reporting providing unpaid caregiving to another adult. We know this is a growing need, right? Especially as the formal or paid care workforce becomes increasingly more difficult to hire, maintain, to fill, all these other things. That's a separate talk. But our Care Hive work is a series of projects and also a consortium around family caregiving and trying to really understand in depth the very diverse and complex experiences that family caregivers are having providing care. So I think we have caregivers from every state represented right now, except for like South Dakota. So if anyone knows of a family caregiver in South Dakota, please send them our way. We've even got some folks international now at this point, but they are doing some work around understanding how the pandemic has impacted the caregiving experience, what the intersection with that has been these days with certainly technology use, as well as some things around emotional strain, and in particular, what that has had to do with COVID too, the last couple of years. So let me skip around here. I also just want to mention that in addition to focusing on caregivers, in general, right, understanding the full range of people's aging experiences or experiences with aging can help us to get out a better understanding of how people who are currently aging, and for those who will age, how they wish to do so. So AGNES was an example of a tool to certainly cultivate empathy within oneself, right? But across, I would say, the majority of our research, we are valuing, firsthand accounts from other people. So one example I have up here is our 85 plus lifestyle leaders panel. This is a panel we've convened since 2015 or so, comprised of folks all ages 85 and older who come every other month to chat with us. Now we're totally on Zoom about essentially the challenges and the opportunities of unprecedented longevity, because these are folks who we believe kind of represent a sample of what it's like to kind of live on the leading edge of aging. They are dealing with advanced older age in real time. They can tell us where we're falling short, what we can be doing better. But they also represent early adoption for a lot of these folks of new technologies and of products and services that are just coming to market, right? So this crew has helped inform development of new kinds of services and products. They've helped. It's really also important generally for my gerontology nerds out there, like to fill in the gap. There's not a lot of research happening with this population in general too. So we have work going on with them. So that's sort of a pitch for also my two panels in terms of thinking a little bit about how we can really understand people's experiences for how they wish to age. And certainly I think that has to do with how people want to sort of where place is, right? When we think about people aging in place. So I talk way too much, and this was a lot of information in a fairly short amount of time. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for some discussion and questions. I will leave you here with this. We have a couple different ways for folks to kind of engage with us and stay in touch with us. We have a volunteer database where folks of any age can sign up, and we'll get in touch if there's sort of a particular study that you would meet criteria for. We have a monthly e-newsletter. We have our panels, like our caregiver panel. We have a panel of financial professionals. We have a panel of 85 plusers. We also do a little bit of programming around intergenerational programming for teens. And so shameless plug for that, because we offer scholarships, and actually that is happening now. So if you know of any teenagers doing intergenerational work, we'd love for them to apply. I will also put the links, all these links in the chat for you too. And then I wanted to leave you with my email as well in case you want to chat more or reach out further.
That's great. Thank you, Taylor. What a great presentation. I'm so glad you could join us today. I'll open it up to questions. I didn't see any that pop up in the chat box, but I know one that we always get is, will you share your slides with us? I'll include that in the recording, if that's okay. And anyone want to take their self off mute and ask a question? Do you have to be local to the Boston area if you have a senior that wants to volunteer for your panels?
Frankly, no. Yeah, we're kind of increasingly national with Zoom these days. So a lot of our panel research, or I should say all of our panel research is online right now. So we, yeah, we'll take anybody from anywhere.
Fantastic. How did your group of 85 plus seniors do with social isolation during the pandemic? Was that an issue that popped up in your discussions?
Definitely. Yeah, it's been, I think, really interesting because this is a group that I would say is 50-50, living in like age restricted environments, senior housing of some sort, versus those who are kind of trying to remain at home in the community. So yeah, so I think the impact based on even just that kind of split of characteristic is very different. So we actually had a student do some work with me this summer on looking specifically back at this kind of extensive diary style study we did with them when COVID was first happening. And we sort of collected some data over time with that group. And yeah, I think the sort of impact in the institutional environment kind of looked a little more just like a little more complex with regard to like the emotional side of things. It was sort of like we recognize activity directors, they're like really trying their best with this stuff, but also this like really sucks. I can't go anywhere, right? And this is like mentally exhausting. Whereas the folks in community were like navigating like to what degree do I let my daughter in, right? Or like how often, you know, I'm like kind of keeping people out of my home, right? Like I don't want people in here right now, and sort of maybe more of these like technical or instrumental concerns. So I'm totally yammering on at this point, but definitely an issue for both groups. Yeah.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Steve Toll. Taylor, it was a great presentation. I really learned so much. In the group of people that you worked with, is there, like, what function level? In other words, is there, how do you handle cognitive decline, various cognitive levels, people with dementia? Is there some criteria that you had when you select the people?
That's a really good question. So I will say, okay, personal opinion, not that of the MIT AgeLab, right? We don't do a ton of research with folks with dementia or various kind of cognitive processes. And we know there's tons of, they're called Alzheimer's Research Disease Centers, ARDCs, like designated centers for this work and various medical schools around the country, right? We have done some work with our caregiver panel, so caregivers caring for somebody with some sort of dementia diagnosis, to examine like what is very particular about that experience, right? What are some of the stressors and strains and what's really unique to that? So that has been some of the work we've done in that area, which has been really interesting. But to your question also, about screening for that as a part of our 85 plus panel or any of our other work. It's certainly something we keep in mind. I'm not usually a stickler, like I'm not administering cognitive screening to anybody or things like that when I kind of meet people for the first time. But it's kind of something as a social worker, I always have in the back of my mind, right? We kind of want to make sure that folks are able to participate in the way that, you know, we're looking for folks to be able to answer our questions in a way, right? And so if it seems like it's not the right fit, you know, we kind of have to evaluate that accordingly.
So there's no formalized kind of assessment tool that you're using when you're, selecting people to be in this group. Is that correct?
No, yeah, no, we keep it open. Yeah, by purpose.
Okay, thanks.
So Steve runs our music therapy discussion group on the third Wednesday of every month. Have you all ever done any research involving music in your work?
Oh my gosh.
Just curious.
Yeah, I don't know that we have in a little while. Yeah, what an interesting implication. I'm thinking about that C3 consortium, just all the stuff going on in people's homes potentially. That feels very, yeah, that feels like a very particular experience.
Well,
Oh,
we use music to really open people up, and it really helps with developing connection. So, it's something to think about. I'll contact you. We can talk about it sometime if you'd like.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
I have a question. Sorry, I'm not on camera. I'm on the computer that doesn't have the camera working right now. I keep forgetting when I log in on this computer. Anyway, so I'm Deanne. I'm in Las Vegas, and I've been working with seniors for as long as I can actually even remember. Goodness gracious. And it's interesting. You said intergenerational scholarships, because we are looking into programs that I actually want to filter through my chapter on connecting the youth and the seniors, and mainly because of the technology component. As it is, my husband and I, although we are not millenniums anymore, we do help a lot of the seniors, even in our own apartment building. That's what's so funny. And so I see that if they have someone they can connect to, they're more open. Their mindset is much more open to learning technology. So I'm just curious what your scholarship is and what that program kind of is for and about.
Definitely. Thank you for asking that. So Omega stands for what? Another long acronym: Opportunities for Multigenerational Engagement, Growth, and Action. Omega is really directed towards teens. We feel that high school students, teenagers are maybe served particularly poorly by intergenerational programs relative to other age groups. You'll hear all sorts of things about, shared space like kindergartens, next to like in retirement communities, or like elementary school students. When I was a student, I did like a letter writing thing at my Council on Aging with elementary school students. So teenagers in particular, we feel like are left out a little bit more. You also hear about college students sharing homes with retirees. I digress, but so we designed this program because we had that group in mind, and we were thinking, all right, like high school students not being served well, like what can we be doing here? And so the program is really focused on kind of empowering students to create their own intergenerational programs, or to frankly become a leader in one that's maybe already established. So we kind of do event programming throughout the year. We do a big summit, we call it, every fall. And then we do our scholarship in the spring. And the idea is that maybe we get a student exposed to the idea of a career in aging or an intergenerational program when they're early in high school. They can then kind of create maybe a club at their school. They can get engaged in a program like yours that you're thinking about, Deanne, to be doing work that basically brings younger people and older people together. They do that all during high school, and then they become a junior or a senior, and they apply for our scholarship. We award $5,000 scholarships to teens. They have to be in the US, but they can be anywhere in the US, who have gone on to do this work. And then actually each teen also receives a $1,000 match award, which the idea is that money goes to their program or club or school or whatever nonprofit to enable the sustainability of the activities. So, I mean, you could say, we're just dangling carrots in front of people's faces a little bit, right? Like, you should definitely get involved in this idea, right? College scholarship money on the line here. But we've found it to also be a really unique way to really meet students too, that like are all over the place and are doing these really cool things that are trying to do this work. So
I love it. I definitely will be reaching out outside of this.
Totally.
Because we've already seen that it can be very instrumental here. Where 50% of our population is over 50 here. So we're trying to fast track solutions. And I agree, you have to dangle a carrot. So this could be the very carrot that we needed, because we do want to do some of those programs through the city, but also the city only has so much budget and manpower. And so that's why, my chapter is such a vital solution, and that could be something we could really work on together. And now I am actually a mindset mentor. And so I have to ask this question. You're talking all this technology. The biggest challenge we have had with seniors, and I know you have too, is, they're in their past, right? And their past is, oh my gosh, I'm still getting past black and white TV, your 85 plus group, right? To this TV that I have now that has all these app thingies, and so they really, really fight technology is what we've noticed. Hence the reason for the intergenerational idea that we came up with, but they fight it. And I know when I'm working with people's minds, and including my seniors, it's all about just repeatedly giving them exposure to these things. So when you're talking about like this home model that's all connected, love it. I'm involved with a company that does something a little less than that, but is connected for them. And everything from transportation, right? Some of them have like this stigma about taking buses, not to mention they're not very respected anymore like they used to be by the younger generation. So just adding in all these factors, how is this playing into your research? Because they're set in their ways.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, anecdotally, I'll just speak from my other hat as just like someone who volunteers in a technology program. I find that that's pretty similar to what you're saying, Deanne. And like people are also afraid to break things. Like that almost happens at every interaction I have on my very first visit with a new client is like, I just don't want to do the wrong thing. Like, it's like, okay, what happens if you break it though? Like, what if we just try and break it? Let's see what will happen. Right. So yeah, I think, we now AgeLab hat back on, we live a little bit more in, for any of my psychologists on the call, the Maslow's pyramid. A lot of our research questions and work are really more on the higher up of the pyramid. So really thinking about how we can kind of bring fun back to aging and fun to people's mindsets around some of this stuff. So I think that's why it's important also for our work to actually, to your point, Dan, like catalog and validate what you're saying to be true. Mm-hmm. Like, are people like actually hesitant? And if so, then why? And that's good to know, because then we can, push people forward from there, essentially, if we needed, to help change our thinking about that.
I love it, because that's exactly what I do when I'm working with my seniors and they're hesitant for any service. I mean, sometimes they're even hesitant just to get home care. Well, some stranger is going to come in my house, or any service that we want to offer them to age in place. And it's literally about getting to those why questions, like you said, find out why and what's triggering that. So, I see that being a big factor in what you're doing moving forward, because it's a factor in what I've been trying to do, getting my seniors to move forward. So I'm glad to hear that. Very glad. I'll be reaching out, by the way, because this is really resonating. You can tell. I have a lot more, but I don't want to hog the time.
And I love that you said bring fun back to aging. That's something that Scott Fulton and I, Scott Fulton is the chairman of the board, have been talking about a lot. How can we change the conversation around aging? We're actually having a discussion panel on May 4th, if you'd like to participate, on just changing the way we market as an industry to make it not so, to make it fun. So any more questions that we have? Oh, Ron. Hi, Ron.
Hi, Tara. Hi. Great presentation, Taylor. I've been actually following you guys for quite some time, since I ran a section covering 50 plus people for a newspaper on Long Island for a while ago. But so what really interested me a lot is just this whole notion of you were talking about at the end of, the full range of aging, because I think that, we talk a lot about, okay, so by, 2045, we're going to be a white minority country. We focus a lot on diversity from age and ethnicity and gender and so forth. But I think, the issue of age diversity, I think, is one which we're really not, what we are focusing. I mean, everyone's looking at it, but I think that, we still sort of stratify things. We still sort of segment. We assume that people, it's sort of like you're younger or you're older. Whereas, so I actually run a radio talk show called 45 Forward, which Tara's been on, and so Deanne's been on as well as guests. But in doing the show about, sort of life after 40, in your second half of life, what that's like, there's just a tremendous range of experiences. And I think that, we don't, when you overlay those different experiences with, not only with changes demographically and in terms of lifestyle changes. I mean, what's the impact of a divorce rate that's still like 50%? So we still look at a lot of things, and even in terms of, where do we age in place? I mean, so when my generation, my parents, it was like, okay, you age in place in your home, or you go south, you go to a retirement community, or you go to Florida. And now that the choices are changing a lot, or those are diversifying, right? So you have, where you used to have snowbirds, now you have people who are sometimes snowbirds, but then they want to stay in an assisted living facility because they're pretty much independent. So I think there are lots of choices that, that people are making. And I think that you're right. I think we're really behind from a policy perspective in terms of looking at how we do these things. And part of it is, I think, because, we need systems that are really flexible, and we don't have the flexibility in our systems. And the other part is denial, right? We're just in denial. And I think that, to Tara's last point about, about, putting the fun back in things. I mean, I just, one of the people I interviewed recently was a guy, John Leland, who did a book called Happy is a Choice, right? About living with six people who are 85 and older for a year. And just realizing that our conceptions about what the experience of aging is like is not really at all what it's like for a lot of people. And it's not that much different from when you're younger, and in some ways is rewarding in ways you wouldn't expect.
May I just say, I think you just summarized the whole talk. I mean, truly, I'm just co-signing all that you're saying and validating it, because this is a lot of what our director, Joe Coughlin's thought leadership is around, right? That people truly have like choices unlike ever before. And it actually really matters, because it influences how people, what they want from these systems, right? Yeah, I had a professor once say to me that ageism is one of the only isms that people will tolerate like forever, essentially. So we've been trying to, we launched what we call our Aging and Equity series. It's a series of kind of public talks. I'll send you all a link as an example to one we just had last week, but around examining a little bit deeper these different intersections, this sort of intersectionality of age with race and ethnicity, with issues of gender, with issues of, insert demographic characteristic here, right? But yeah, I think we've got a lot of work to do, to say the very least.
Well, I'm glad you're there.
Thank you.
Gosh, well, thank you. That was fantastic. We went a little bit over, but it was definitely worth it, Taylor. Fantastic presentation. I hope that you will come back and visit us again. We have your email, so I know you're going to be hearing from us. You're not going to get away from us so easily, but thank you all for joining us. I hope to see you at some of our upcoming presentations. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to me at NAIPC@ageandplace.org. So we'll see you all next time. Thank you.